All right, well, good afternoon. Um, Thanks to everybody who's tuned in via webcast and who's here today. I'm Kim Nygren. I'm the director of the Water Availability Division. We have our water rights permitting program here and our water masters. And so what we're here for today are really two projects that we're going to be working on that are implementation from the most recent legislative session. We're doing a rulemaking that will implement House Bills 720 and 1964. And then we will be contracting some work that we've gotten funding for under House Bill 723 and the appropriations bill. That's sort of a quick introduction of what we're here for today. I think probably everybody's gotten the announcement, so you have a preview of that and a little bit of an agenda as well. I'll run through introductions of staff who are here sitting with me today. First, probably most people know Dr. Kathy Alexander. She's going to be initially leading the rulemaking and the contracting process that we're going to be doing. We're hoping to bring on another technical specialist. Ross Henderson left us to go be a SOA judge, so we'll be looking to fill his shoes and hopefully get Kathy some help with the rule projects. For the time being, she's getting to wear, 6 hats now. There's Kelly Mills, who's the assistant division director. Amy Sedemeyer, who is now our permitting section manager. She used to work as our water master section manager, and she's moved over to the permitting side of the house. And then Ruth Takita, who's our attorney for the rulemaking project. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to Kathy, leading both projects. She'll be doing most of the talking today, but I'll get started. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Kathy Alexander with the Water Availability Division, and thank everyone for coming and everybody that's listening in. And we're going to start this off with a discussion on the rulemaking project that we're doing. It's the project number is 2019-116-297-OW, and it's entitled Procedure for Action on Certain Water Right Amendment Applications and Surface Water Appropriations for Aquifer Recharge and Aquifer Storage and Recovery. So I think I'm going to go through a little bit about what those statutes did and then talk about a little bit about the rule timeline and some thoughts that we have on the rule project, and then open it up for questions or comments from y'all. So House Bill 1964 basically streamlines the water right permitting process for simple water right amendments that do things like change a use, add a purpose of use, small diversion point moves, things that don't affect other water rights or the environment, and they're streamlined because they're not subject to notice and technical review. House Bill 720 removes permitting barriers for aquifer storage and recovery and aquifer recharge projects for both new water rights and existing water rights. It added a recharge as a beneficial use under the Texas Water Code 11.023. House Bill 720 also added a new section 11.157, which sets out the process for new appropriations of water for aquifer storage and recovery and aquifer recharge. And it clarifies that water for these types of projects doesn't have to be continuously available. So it's not 100% of the time like a municipal use or 75% of the time like an agricultural use. These new appropriations are subject to notice and contested case hearing, and the statute also puts in a 180-day time frame for technical review of these applications. And we're required to adopt rules related to availability and the expedited process. There's also a section 11.158 that addresses amendment applications, and that section addresses water right holders who have a permit that authorizes storage where the storage has not been constructed. And so the first part of that would let a water right holder remove the authorization from storage, and if they're not changing their diversion amount, and it's for an ASR, it doesn't affect other water rights in the environment, that amendment can be processed without notice and hearing. The other part of that looks at a water right holder who has authorization for storage that hasn't been constructed can file an amendment application to remove the storage, but take some of that storage and translate it into an increased diversion amount through an evaporation credit. And an evaporation credit, it just means that when the water right was authorized, the evaporation from storage was taken into account when the permit was issued. And so this would allow someone to take some of the authorized water and that would have gone into storage and convert it to a diversion right. It also, that part of the statute also has some provisions for water right holders with an authorized reservoir that's been constructed but has lost capacity due to sedimentation. And so they can file for an amendment to, if they're using it in an ASR project, to allow some of that water to be, they can recover their storage through an ASR. And both of those two types of amendments are subject to notice and contested case hearing, and we will be adopting rules that talk about how that would be implemented. So the rule timeline, so this is a somewhat expedited process. The House Bill 720 had a rule timeline of June 1st of 2020. So those of you who are familiar with the rulemaking process would know that this is going to be going pretty quickly. We anticipate that the proposal for that rule will be in November of this year. So right now, in terms of what we're thinking, we're looking at chapters 281, 295, and 287. So chapter two, yes, yeah, 297. So chapter 281 and 281.19 has some provisions for technical review and timeframes. And so since we have a 180-day timeframe for that technical review, by statute, we'd be looking at adding some provisions to reflect that in 281.19. And also, in the 295 rules, those are predominantly related to notice in 295.158, because you have House Bill 1964 that relates to notice provisions for simple amendments, but you also have the notice provisions that would be required for implementing House Bill 720. One of the bigger things we would be looking at is looking at Chapter 297, which are substantive rules. And so we're looking at adding a definition of recharge consistent with the part of House Bill 720 that relates the new subchapter H, which is not the water rights piece, but just for consistency and implementation. We'd also looking at 297.41, the general approval criteria, 297.43, which is the list of beneficial uses. And since, as I said earlier, recharge was added as a beneficial use, we'd be looking at changing that in 297.43. And then 297.42 are our water availability rules. And so we would be looking at adding availability criteria for new appropriations for aquifer storage and recovery and aquifer recharge. And what we're currently thinking, and we certainly appreciate any comments or suggestions that y'all have, we're looking at setting that criteria at, that the water must be available in the water availability model at least 1 year in the period of record, the full amount requested. And that's kind of where we think we're going with that. And we would also probably add provisions for how we would consider evaporation credits or storage loss to sedimentation. So definitely looking for comments on the availability criteria and the changes to 297. But any other comments that y'all want to make would be greatly appreciated. And I think now I'm going to open it up for any comments or questions, and we ask that you go ahead and come up to the mic if you have any comments or questions. So these rules address the water rights component of it, and so how that would be handled wouldn't be really addressed in our portion of the rule. It's just, if it's for a new permit, we look at the water from the stream and its availability. And it's an amended permit, for aquifer storage and recovery itself, adding that to a water right. You don't have to add that to a water right as long as you're not changing anything else about the water right when you put it in the ASR. It's place of use, purpose of use, diversion point. Anybody else?
Fernandez at LRE Water. So I just want to clarify if I understand it correctly. You're talking about an ASR, you could get a new water right for a certain quantity of water, and that water only has to be available for 1 year out of the model period record from the window?
Yes, and so that would be if it's for an ASR project.
Thanks. So, okay. So if I apply for a water right for that quantity for 1 year, whatever I wanted from the WAM, and I get a priority date associated with that, the next person who comes in the door is going to have the same option at a junior priority date. Is that, the basic procedure?
Well, so if a water right holder, if someone or an entity applies for a new water right, and we run the reliability, and say you've asked for 100, and 100 was available in 1 year of the period of record, that means that lesser amounts could be available in all of the other years. And so the subsequent person that comes in would only be able to get what was left over as unappropriated water.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Looks like we don't have any other comments on the rulemaking, but what I did want to close with was just to give a little bit more information about our rulemaking schedule. We do have to have adopted rules by June of 2020. We're looking at proposal, like Kathy said, in November. So this is an informal stakeholder meeting. Certainly any comments y'all have are appreciated now. But when we propose the rules in the fall, we will follow that proposal up with a stakeholder meeting to give comments on a written document you'll be able to review and provide specific comments on, as well as a comment period that'll be associated with the rulemaking. Then from there, we'll look at the comments we got, and there's the ability to make some changes to the rule based on those comments. And we'll then go forward to adoption. And that adoption package will have a final set of rules that we're proposing to adopt, and responses to comments received, and that'll go in front of our commission for that final adoption. Just so that y'all see the full picture. I think adoption will happen probably sometime in the late spring, so we have it finished up by June.
And I would just want to add on your announcement, it has my email address, and so it's kathy.alexander@tceq.texas.gov. And because of the expedited timeline, we're asking that if y'all want to email me comments, if you could do that by August 9th, so we can make sure we have the opportunity to fully consider all of the comments that y'all might have on this. And, those comments could be anywhere from general comments to specific suggestions for rule language. And so with that, I think we're going to close down this portion of the meeting, and I'm going to ask our contracting staff to come on up. And so when we start talking about the WAMs, I've asked our legal and contracting staff to come on up here. And so with me today, I have Andre Petty, Trace Tankersley, and Angela Burnett. So this part of the meeting is about House Bill 723, which amended Texas Water Code 16.012 to require TCEQ to obtain or develop updated water availability models for the Brazos, Neches, Red, and Rio Grande Basin. And this work is to extend the hydrologic inputs to the model, the naturalized flows, and the evaporation. The Texas Legislature appropriated $2,162,000 collectively for those 4 basins. And so this would be limited to those 4 basins and not the associated coastal basins. So we're looking to develop a request for qualifications, and we hope to gather information from y'all that will assist us in the process. And I'm going to preface this discussion with a disclaimer that any information provided today, including answers to any questions, may change as the RFQ is developed. So we will be issuing 1 RFQ solicitation and will potentially award 4 contracts. Under this process, any qualified entity could apply for 1 or more contracts. The funding was appropriated for this biennium, so we're anticipating that this project would be completed by August 31st of 2021. The RFQ is going to include very specific instructions on how to submit a complete application, and it's highly suggested that potential applicants read these carefully and complete the application in its entirety. Now I'm going to turn to a little overview of general and some basin-specific issues that we're looking at. So this project does update the hydrology data set. That's the naturalized flows and the evaporation inputs. It's not intended to be an update of the models themselves, the water rights, et cetera, the control points, those type of things, unless a small update is needed to facilitate adding the new hydrology information. So, I think we anticipate that some of the data that's collected for this and organized in the workbooks for the naturalized flows could be used by TCEQ staff to then turn around and update the current conditions, models, return flows, diversions, et cetera. So the updates are going to follow the same process as we used to develop the original data sets, and that's so that we can have consistencies in the flows across the old and new periods of record. We're in the process of posting the final WAM Resolved Technical Issues document out on our website, so if you're signed up for that portion to get notifications on that portion of the website, you should receive a notification when that's posted sometime over the next couple of days. The project's also going to include a review of the existing naturalized flow workbooks to see if any refinements are needed there, just so that we can make sure that everything kind of matches up, because we use these models to look at amendments to water rights and new appropriations. So on some of the more in-depth data issues, we anticipate working closely with whoever the selected contractor is for this to facilitate acquisition of TCEQ data, such as diversions or return flows or GIS, and a lot of the more specific things associated with a particular basin, like, do we use different gauges? Do we keep the same gauges? Loss factors are things that would be discussed with the specific contractor selected for that project. So there, just as a note, one of the basins is a little different than the others. That's the Red River Basin. That basin's subject to an interstate compact, and so for that particular project, we would anticipating developing 2 different sets of flows so that when we permit, we can implement the compact. For the Brazos, we anticipate starting with the flow extension through 2015 that's already been developed and reviewed by TCEQ staff. It's currently available on the Brazos River Authority's website, but we would definitely be providing that information to the selected contractor. On the Neches, what we're looking at is making sure that the hydropower releases in that basin were managed appropriately in the flow naturalization process, so we would anticipate some attention paid to those things. For the Rio Grande, we'll certainly I think we would facilitate obtaining data for the Rio Grande to the extent that that data is available. And also, we could consider alternate methods for flow naturalization in the Rio Grande, so long as the alternate method suggested is consistent with the basic architecture of that WAM model, so that we wouldn't be redoing the WAM model. That's not covered in the contract. And water entering Texas from New Mexico will be treated exactly as it was in the existing WAM. So, and on that one, we'd really appreciate any specific thoughts that y'all might have on alternative processes for the naturalized flows in the Rio Grande. And so with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments. And just know that there will be other opportunities for specific questions once the RFQs are put out there. So again, come up to the microphone if you have any comments. Thanks. Okay.
Hello, Augusto Villalon with Friesen Nichols. Kathy, what's the schedule of the solicitation? When's it coming out? Kind of ballpark, when is it due? I heard you say that you want it all completed by August 2021, but that was the only date that I caught.
As of right now, we're just currently trying to establish information and receive information from the public to help us develop the RFQ. After August 9th, the TCEQ team will be getting together and we will start processing and working on the RFQ. At that time, we will develop a timeline. The timeline will be mentioned or established inside of the RFQ. So at this current time, it's hard to say, but I anticipate that by the end of August, maybe beginning of September, we will probably be in the development stage of the request for qualifications.
Okay, so look for it sometime first part of September.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say that's a good time, Frank.
Okay.
Can't give a specific date right now because we haven't even started the development stage of the request for qualifications.
Okay. Second question, the peer review third-party QA/QC, is that going to be a separate contract? Is that going to be within the contract of each river basin?
That would be within the contract for each river basin and included, which is that's the way we're planning to do it. So the entities that are applying for these should consider including that.
Okay. And the hydrology is the same hydrology, the procedures, approaches that were used in the past and so forth. What about hub requirements?
Well, so those will be, I mean, we'll have those spelled out in detail in the solicitation. And if you have any questions about complying with the hub requirements, our hub team contact information will be on there. They'll be available for any questions.
But at the moment, you guys are considering imposing hub requirements?
Have we, I don't know if we've.
Or you still?
I would anticipate that based on the amount of the contracts that will be established, that there will be a hub requirement.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
One of the suggestions to have a check-off with the old naturalized and reservoir one thing for the migration data, we So the current existing file we have a lot of information without using. So our suggestion to the contractor is to download our latest mapping. And for naturalized flow, we find the old existing naturalized flow that really has some with that. We can provide you the information on which control point on each month the data could be measured. I think some of the basic flow may have changed. So the old naturalized flow, when the contractor developed it, but all the time the stream flow is old.
Hi, David Harkins, Carollo Engineers. From a technical side, you discussed the data that we're going to be needing, water use, historical return flows. Can you speak a little bit to what that means in terms of that relationship? It was a long time ago, it was a little different, and now y'all probably got better data sets and the staff involvement. So can you just speak a little bit to that?
Well, as I said, I think that as with any of these projects, and we've done several of them recently, TCQ staff would facilitate getting that information that is TCEQ data to the selected contractor. So our diversion data, whatever we have available and in the format that it's in, we would make sure that we provided it. And the same goes for updated return flow data. And TCEQ's GIS-related data, whatever we have posted or in-house, we'd make sure that our data sets were provided to that contractor.
And just to give you all an idea of the time frame of the RFQ, as I mentioned earlier, right now we're in a process of where we're trying to gather information. So any questions or any comments that you all have, if you could submit them to Kathy by August 9th, that would be very helpful. After that period, we will be sitting down and getting together with the program and helping them develop the request for qualifications. I anticipate that will probably begin around the beginning of September or the end of August. The total process for an RFQ, since we're trying to expedite this one, will probably be anywhere from 4 to 6 months for the total process from beginning to end. So it's possible that the contracts won't be awarded, or we won't be awarding a vendor or numerous vendors until sometime early 2020.
Nelun Fernando from the Texas Water Development Board. Is the idea that the updated data sets will be ready by August 31st of 2021?
Yes, that would be the closeout date of the contract, and we would make those available.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and just as a reminder, if you have comments and you're just thinking about it, for these, as with our rule project, you can email them to me at kathy.alexander@tceq.texas.gov by close of business on August 9th of 2019, and we'll consider those comments as we've discussed in drafting the RFQ. We will not be responding either to these comments or to the comments from the rule project. And there will be additional opportunities to ask formal questions after the RFQ solicitation has been posted. That is part of the process. So with that, I guess we'll turn it back over to Kim to wind us down.
I guess in winding down, I'll just say thanks for coming. I know we've had questions previous to today, which has been really helpful. I mean, that really helps us know what kind of questions there are and helps us develop that RFQ. You know, our contracting process does have a timeline to it. So, I mean, I've heard Andre say, you know, we're expecting a fall RFQ, and then possibly awards January, February-ish. So I hope that helps you all know how to look for the RFQ and kind of manage resources in responding to it. We're really looking forward to getting the process started. And certainly if you have more questions, ask those now. But of course, when you actually see the RFQ, that usually generates a lot of questions. And so there is a process after the RFQ for you to ask those formal questions and then get responses. And we encourage you to ask questions at that time too. And we're here, you know, after we wind down, we'll sign off on webcast and thank everybody for tuning in. And we're around here for questions. Thank y'all for coming.